Hey folks, Nicole here, breaking in to give a little bit of context before we get into today's episode. First of all, today's guest is friend of the show, Matt. I was so anxious to get into the Hellraiser combo that I didn't really give Matt a full proper introduction. Matt is yet another member of the Straight Chilling community that I've gotten to know a little bit over the years, and then we got to hang out in real life at the Overlook Film Fest in April. He is also a talented artist and a super thoughtful person who sends amazing snail mail. He lives in Jacksonville and runs a martial arts studio that focuses on historical sword fighting technique. So he'll be talking a little bit about that later. But Matt is just a super cool person, and I'm glad that we got to sit down one-on-one and discuss this movie. Also, we're mostly talking about Hellraiser 1987, but in the course of the convo, we talk about several of the entries, Hellraiser 2 and Hellraiser 2022 specifically. So I just want to give a general spoiler warning for the entire Hellraiser franchise. And without further ado, let's get into it.
Welcome to Light and Shadow, a podcast about the complex themes presented in the horror genre. I'm your host, Nicole, and it's time to share another dark tale.
Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the Religion and Horror series. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the iconic 1987 film Hellraiser, which was written and directed by Clive Barker. And I am very excited this evening to have on first-time guest and friend of the show, Matt. Welcome, Matt.
Hello. I'm pretty excited to be here.
Yeah, it's always great to have new guests. I feel like long-time internet friends, first time guest. And before we get into the Hellraiser discussion, would you be so kind as to share a little bit of your religious background with the folks?
Okay, yeah, we'll hop right into it. So I grew up in like the middle of nowhere in Kentucky, and my father's family was Church of Christ, and my mother's family was Southern Baptist. And I attended both churches, depending on which grandma took me.
Well-rounded.
And then after my parents got divorced, we were very poor, and I ended up joining a youth group / Bible study. That was like my whole social life, pretty much from 8th grade to 10th grade. The Bible study was my favorite part. The church, not so much, but, I was very active, and so I was going to church like 4 days a week. It was twice on Sunday, Bible study on Tuesday, Wednesday night service. And then Friday night, the youth minister would have us all come over, so we weren't out doing crazy stuff instead. So, so at that time, I was into it deep. I was the vice president of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes at school. I wasn't even an athlete, but somehow I was the vice president.
Yeah, that happens at small schools.
Yeah. And then the youth minister and his son who his son was a year older than me. Me and him like was flirting with doing seminary when we got out of high school, but the youth minister ended up moving away, and then all that kind of went away. Once he moved away, the youth group fell apart. The Bible study fell apart. All that fell apart. So it was like a really weird time. You know, you're at that age where everything's weird anyway. And then I joined the Navy right out of high school. And my first year in the Navy, it took like a year and a half. I read the whole Bible front to back. And that was the same summer as 9/11. And after that, I ended up becoming an atheist. And I think I've been an atheist pretty much the whole time for like the last 20 years now.
You're the second one I've had on the show. Jacqueline was the first. She broke the
I'm glad
seal.
she came on before me. I honestly, I don't really talk about this stuff unless it's with close friends. So throwing it out on the internet is feels a little weird, but I still really enjoy a lot of that goes on, you know, the history of the church, the history of the literature. I enjoy going into the mythology and the dogma, and I take a lot of great courses on it, like the Gnostic text and the Dead Sea Scrolls and all that. I actually I listened to the Gospel of Thomas today. Like it was like 2 hours long. I was like, why not? I'll knock it out, you know. So.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me because I know you're into history and all that kind of stuff. So that makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, and I know other folks who are, I don't know if atheist is the right word, but I have a friend who's more agnostic, and like she loves Renaissance art and medieval art and like all of that. Like she loves religious art. So I do think it's really interesting that there is a draw for some people who, even though they don't have like a personal faith, they still find value in like religious text and religious art. There's like something to it beyond just faith. And I think this might be the perfect movie to talk about in that context because there is so much great imagery and mythology and just like rich stuff to talk about.
Well, on the history part, I teach historical fencing, and a lot of the books were written right in the middle of the Reformation and the Papal Wars. So like it's all together. You can't really get away from it. And I find it all super interesting, like why people were making choices they were making, and what literature and dogma they used to excuse certain actions but not the others. And it as deep as it goes, I'll keep digging, you know.
Yeah. Well, to study anything religious is definitely to study humanity. I've said before that there's clearly something very human about religion because almost every culture in the world has some kind of religion. And humanity over the centuries, we've all managed to come up with some religion, like regardless of where we come from or when we live. So there's something really human about the practice of religion, whether you have faith or not. So thank you so much for being brave and sharing. I never want anybody to feel like pressured to do so, but since I am in this little religion and horror niche, I think it's always valuable to hear where people come from and like where their perspective is. And it's also been really cool to just kind of learn more about people who are in a similar space to me, who are not in a similar space to me. I just find people's religious faith journeys to be very interesting. So it's something that I always like to talk about. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I've been listening to the back episodes, and listening to you talk about your church has been really nice, because I think that's the way, if I was going to do church, that's the way I would want to do it. I would want to sit around with close friends and talk, opposed to sitting on a pew with a bunch of strangers and have someone talk at me. Yeah, I think the way you do it sounds so appealing compared to what I went through as a young person.
Yeah, it's been really good for us. I mean, I've never really, left faith behind. I've had my ups and downs with the system. So it would be really difficult for me if I didn't have my current like house church situation, because I don't see myself ever going back to like a big corporate gathering. So it's been really important to us to have a practice that we can still do consistently with others that just leaves all of the machine behind, you know. And even in saying that, I think there's still a place for big corporate gatherings, and like just depending on where you are in your faith. I mean, some people really relate to that, and especially if you do have kids and you want them to, to have a faith journey with other kids their age, it can be valuable then. So I definitely am not like anti big church, so to speak, but for us in this time in our life, I'm very thankful for something different. And I know a lot of people out there are the same as us who are like, well, we would like to have some kind of faith practice, but we don't want to do what we used to do. So it's been a really fulfilling thing for us.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about community, and you have to find the community that fits your personality and your lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And, church is one of those things that it seems like there are only so many ways to do it. You don't see a lot of variety in the practice of church, what that looks like. So anytime I see somebody doing church in a different way, in a creative way, I'm all for it. I support it because, people just, they learn differently, they express differently, they connect differently. So it's just nice to have options.
I was reading an article the other day that talked about a bunch of churches that started during COVID over Zoom and how they're still going. And like when people could leave, they're like, no, this is what I've grown to like this more than actually going out. And you can really filter who you're sharing your faith with that way. So that seemed really cool, what the article was saying.
Yeah, definitely. So it's time to get into Hellraiser a little bit, I think. So I usually at this point talk about, why I chose this film, why we chose this film. And honestly, I think you can't do a religion and horror detour without covering Hellraiser at some point. It's a big one. It's one of those intimidating ones. Like The Exorcist was really hard for me. And Hellraiser is kind of the same. It's like, what are we going to add to this conversation? But it's such a beautiful movie and it's such an important movie in the horror genre. We got to do it. Now, what I cannot remember is why specifically you and I decided to do this episode together. Like, I remember us talking about it at Overlook, but we had some whiskey. We had some of David's whiskey. So the details are murky. Do you remember why we decided to do this episode?
I think we were talking about horror movies in general. And we just kept coming back to Hellraiser for some reason.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, you got to come on then.
I personally love this movie, but I love the novella. I listen to the novella every year at least once. It's only 3 hours long. I listened to it 2 days ago because I knew I was going to be on this episode. You can, in your daily commute, if you have a long commute, you can just knock it out. So, and the book, I prefer the book over the movie, but they're pretty parallel.
I read the novella a few years ago, several years ago now, and I was going to reread it for this episode. And then I was like, you know what? I know Matt is going to be the expert on that. And so I was like, I am just going to relive it through him. So you are going to be the one who reminds us of the novel comparisons and the differences. So feel free to just sprinkle that throughout the episode when you think of something. I mean, I remember it pretty well, but I don't remember like all of the minutia of it. But I do remember enjoying it. I don't know if I can say that I enjoyed it more than the movie, but again, I've only read it once and I've seen the movie like umpteen times. So there's that. Speaking of that, are you a fan of Clive Barker in general? Like, have you seen his other films? Have you read any of his other books?
Clive Barker, for me, has been hit or miss. I generally like his ideas, but sometimes the execution doesn't fall in line for me. I've read a couple of his books, but not all of them. Some of his books are big monster books. I started Galilee last week. And I've been holding off on reading that one because it's a part one of a two-part, and the second part hasn't been written and probably never will be. So as he grows older, he's abandoned projects along the way. He's changed his writing style up quite a bit. The Hellraiser book, Hellbound Heart, I think it looks amazing, and the sequel to it, I did not like at all. Let me see.
How far apart were those written?
I think something like 15, 20 years. Yeah. Yeah. The Scarlet Gospel. Makes sense. That's the name of it. Yeah. It didn't even feel like the same author wrote them. And a lot of the key concepts he changed up. So I would say if you're a Hellraiser fan to not read the Scarlet Gospel. But my favorite Clive Barker story is a short story in the first volume of Books of Blood called Pig Blood Blues. And it's about kids at a boarding school that also is a functioning farm. And crazy supernatural stuff ensues. And it's very short. It's like an hour listen. And I listen to that every Halloween.
Yeah, I have not read Books of Blood. I want to, though, because there are a few things in there I want to read. Like, I really love Candyman. That movie has haunted me since I was a child. And so I want to read The Forbidden. And then I think it's The Forbidden is the name of the short story it's based on. And then I also like the movie Midnight Meat Train. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
Yeah, I have. It's very good. The story's good too.
It is very good. Yeah, I was like, I remember watching it and not knowing it was a Clive Barker story, I think, until after I watched it and saw the credits. And I was like, what? So I would like to read that story as well. I believe
that's Bradley Cooper before he was famous.
Yeah, he was like kind of famous, but I think maybe it was before the Hangover. So he wasn't superstar yet.
It's really weird with Clive Barker because I would say Candyman's probably his most famous and best reviewed property, but the movie is so much different than his short story. I don't know how much involvement he had with that movie at all, and I wonder how that affects him, or the thing that he is most popular for is changed quite a bit from his original vision.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know because I don't think he wrote it. He definitely did not direct it. So he might not have had much to do with the film, but I sure do love it. Mm-hmm. All right. So folks, this is your spoiler warning. We are going to get into the specifics, the details, the gory details, if you will, of Hellraiser.
I was bored. I'd gone to the limits. There was nothing else I wanted. A box. Not just any box. It opens doors. Doors to the pleasures of heaven or hell.
I'll do anything you want. Anything.
It gave me an experience beyond the limits. Give me that box! Give me the box! We have such sights to show you.
Hellraiser, There Are No Limits, a film by Clive Barker.
In Morocco, Frank Cotton, a hedonist, buys a puzzle box said to open the door to a realm of otherworldly pleasure. At home in his bare attic, Frank solves the puzzle and hooked chains emerge, tearing him apart. A black-robed figure resets the puzzle and the room is restored back to normal. Later, Frank's brother Larry moves into the same house. He intends to rebuild his relationship with his second wife, Julia. Larry is unaware that Julia had an affair with his brother Frank before her marriage to him. When Larry accidentally cuts his hand moving furniture, his blood drips on the attic floor and resurrects Frank in a ghoulish form. Julia later finds Frank. Still obsessed with him, she agrees to help restore his body so they can run away together. Julia picks up men in bars and brings them back to the attic where she mortally wounds them. Frank then drains their life, which regenerates his body. Frank explains to Julia that having exhausted all sensory experiences, he sought out the puzzle box, which was supposed to provide access to a realm of new carnal pleasures. When the puzzle was solved, the Cenobites came to subject him to extreme sadomasochism. Kirsty, Larry's teenage daughter and Frank's niece, sees Julia bringing a man to the house and follows her to the attic where she finds Frank. She evades him and escapes with the puzzle box, collapsing shortly after. Awakening in a hospital, Kirsty solves the box out of curiosity and unknowingly summons the Cenobites and a monster called the Engineer, which she narrowly escapes from. The Cenobites' leader, commonly known as Pinhead, explains that although they have been perceived as both angels and demons, they are simply explorers from another dimension seeking carnal experiences, and they can no longer differentiate between pain and pleasure. When they attempt to force Kirsty to return to their realm with them, she informs Pinhead that Frank has escaped them. The Cenobites agree to spare Kirsty and recapture Frank instead, with the condition that Frank must confess to escaping them. Kirsty returns home, where Frank has killed Larry and has taken on his identity by wearing his skin. Julia shows her what is purported to be Frank's flayed corpse in the attic. Julia then leaves the attic, locking the door behind her. The Cenobites appear and, not fooled by the deception, demand to know the man who did this. Kirsty tries to escape, but is held by Julia and Frank. Frank reveals his true identity to Kirsty, and when his sexual advances are rejected, he decides to kill her to complete his rejuvenation. He accidentally stabs Julia instead and drains her without remorse. Frank chases Kirsty to the attic, and when he's about to kill her, the Cenobites appear after hearing him confess to killing her father. Now certain he is the one they are looking for, they ensnare him with chains and hooks and tear him to pieces. When the Cenobites double-cross Kirsty and attempt to take her, she grabs the puzzle box from Julia's dead hands and banishes them by reversing the motions needed to open the puzzle box. Kirsty's boyfriend Steve arrives, and they both escape the collapsing house. Afterward, Kirsty throws the puzzle box into a burning pyre. A vagrant who has been stalking Kirsty walks into the fire and retrieves the box before transforming into a winged, skeleton-like creature and flying away. The box ends up with the same merchant who sold it to Frank, where he offers it to another customer. What's your pleasure, sir?
I love the wraparound, how the movie ends exactly how it starts. I think that's very clever.
Yeah, that tells you a lot, I think, about the whole system and how it works. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I want to talk about is there any specific religion we can associate this story with, or do we think it's just generally occult and or supernatural?
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think they allude to, I think there's the illusion of religion in this movie, but they don't actually tie it to anything. They profess to be both and neither angels and devils. The name Cenobite means member of a religious order. They're members of the Order of the Gash in the book. So the Order of the Cut or the Wound. They constantly talk about hell, but they never determine if that's the Christian hell or not.
Right.
And I know we're probably focusing on this movie, but the next movie shows the hell they're talking about, and it's not the Christian hell.
I actually would love to interweave some of Hellraiser 2 into this discussion because, like, to me, Hellraiser 1 and 2 really kind of belong together, partially because of that. There's some super interesting stuff going on with the depiction of hell in that movie.
Well, there's some big rule changes from 1 to 2. In 1, they'll take anybody who opens the box. It doesn't. So Christy she opens the box. They come to the hospital. They're going to take her. She's a victim. In the second movie, they state that the person has to desire to go with them. So that kind of messes up the whole first movie. If you think about it, like he just sort of walked in the hospital and like, oh, you don't want to go? Cool. There was an accident. All right, I'll see you later. Which isn't scary at all.
Yeah, that is a little bit of a retcon, which I wonder if, they made that tweak because the person who unknowingly opens it in the second one is a child, like is a little girl. So I wonder if they were like, maybe we ought not have Pinhead haul this little girl off. But she ends up going anyway. She ends up going with Kirsty anyway. But yeah, that is a little bit of an interesting change, which I'm sure, with horror sequels, it's a moving target. They're constantly changing the rules.
I like the idea that they'll take anybody. I think them being indifferent is what makes them scary. So
I totally agree.
Yeah, so if you have to seek them out, that takes away a lot of their agency and their power. Because first of all, it's so secret, and it's who's going to do all the studying to know what they're doing. The idea of it being an accident makes it that much more tragic and terrifying.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things I've heard people sort of criticize about this story is that this puzzle box, you would think it would be difficult to open it, that like you would have to study or be really good at puzzles or something. But like across the entire franchise, every time somebody stumbles across it and they solve it in like 15 seconds,
Well, the book does a good job explaining it. So for Frank, it takes him months to figure it out. And then the only reason Kirsty figures it out is because there's blood all over it, and the blood reveals the cracks and and how to move it around. So that's how the book explains how she figures it out in just one night.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. So when I was looking into just like religious parallels to try to determine if there were any crossovers, because I also think that it's just its own thing. But there's lots of religious stuff in the house. So like you can tell that Frank has been like going down all the avenues of like all the religions or many religions trying to like find something fulfilling. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I
was going to ask what you thought about that because they state that was their grandmother's house. And I was wondering if she was very religious and Frank's kind of profaning the objects she already had, or if he actually went out and he's actually doing some kind of rituals or occult stuff with that stuff. And if like he's trying to cast spells from other things besides the puzzle box.
I think honestly, it could be a little bit of both because it does feel layered. Like they show that statue of what I assume is like Mary in front of that window. They show that a few times. So I think it's possible that some of that stuff just was already there. But I remember seeing other things as well from other religions, like in Frank's just little like hovel pile where his like gross mattresses, that made me think that he had been on a journey and had sought out some of these, sacred things. And clearly none of it worked. So he's ended up in a much different place.
Did you notice the two nuns in the movie? When
I did.
Yeah, so Kirsty she obviously is distraught. She's covered in blood and she's walking down the sidewalk like with this just lost face. And she busts through these two nuns and they just turn around and give her stink face and keep walking. And I'm like, help this woman, please.
I know. It's a little bit of a Good Samaritan situation where they just pass her by on the other side of the road. So when I was looking into kind of like what makes a religion, there are 4 tenets of religion. And I can't believe I haven't looked this up sooner in this series, but the 4 kind of tenets are belief, mythology, practices, and social organization. So to me, whatever the Hellraiser situation is with the Cenobites, like I don't know about social organization. We don't have that so much, but the other three, belief, mythology, and practices, like those definitely exist. So I think whatever the Cenobites are a part of can be considered a religion, if you want to call it that, in its own right. It ticks those boxes.
I think there is a social order. It's just not on this plane of existence. Because once they take you and you become a member, there's obviously rules. There's obviously a hierarchy. So it's probably just we don't know about it.
That's a great point. And I think it's partially because the title of the movie is Hellraiser. So we're thinking about a hell that we are familiar with. But like you said earlier, the hell in their world, it does feel more alien than hellish as far as what we're used to. And the labyrinth is a very cool imagery, how everybody's sort of lost in this labyrinth. And then even the depiction of the great god of the labyrinth is Leviathan, but it's not like a big man in the sky. It's that pyramid object that looks like the box. Like that's all so foreign. So I think what you're saying about they have their own order, but not in our dimension, I think that pretty clearly plays out that way.
Yeah. And I think, if you think about the Christian hell, and like you think about like Dante's Inferno and how there's multiple layers and each layer is a little different. I mean, you could easily slide that in there and be like, yeah, this is the labyrinth level where, where lustful people go. Or I like the idea of you don't know what Leviathan is. You don't know the rules. You don't know what it takes to get in there, what it takes to get out. The unknowing makes it more scary, I think.
Yeah. Oh, and something that you said earlier about it being scary that they can just take anybody. You open the box, it doesn't matter what your intention is, they just take you. I think it's really interesting how Kirsty basically makes the classic like deal with the devil to get out of it. And it seems like in the movie, it seems like it doesn't take a ton of convincing, but the fact that she like has a card to play that intrigues them reminded me of that old trope of making a deal with the devil. And then, of course, at the end, she's like upheld her into the bargain and they still tried to take her. Much like if you're going to make a deal with the devil, a lot of times it does not end well.
Well, I think she played against her ego because Frank escaped. Like you let someone escape.
Exactly.
And I don't think they make many deals.
No, I don't think so. No, I think it was just maybe a right place at the right time kind of situation. So I think this kind of seamlessly rolls into the next thing I wanted to spend a little time talking about, which is, are the Cenobites evil? Do we think they are evil?
I would say they are indifferent, and indifferent often is evil. When a lot of times not picking a side means you also don't pick the right side, and that aids the wrong side. And I believe the Cenobites are an embodiment of that. Obviously, they trick people. They do stuff to people against their will. I think all that verges on the side of evil in my mind. If you tell someone you're going to give them pleasure and then you start hurting them, well, you've tricked them. You've at least presented a false narrative, and now you're using that against them. So yeah, I would say they're very evil.
Every time I revisit a movie for this series that I've seen a million times, I find myself watching it differently because I'm looking for specific things. And I've always thought it was very just clear cut. Oh yeah, like look at them, of course they're evil. But I guess I spent more time thinking about the whole concept of how they are monsters clearly, but they're more complicated, and they were human before, and they still have, in some of the later entries, you see that like they still have some of that humanity, like still buried like deep in there. So I did view them as more complex characters this time than I think I usually do. Also because Pinhead is just, even though he's not on screen very long, it's fun to sort of like relish in his sort of evilness, So ultimately, I think they are evil, but they are more complicated than your typical Freddy or Jason or whatever.
Yeah.
There's more complex stuff going on. Although I will say too, it seems like going back to that whole desiring it does seem like evil people are drawn to the order to be Cenobites. Like we know Frank is definitely an evil person. And he's ended up here. Julia, we find out, is quite an evil person. And even though she didn't seek out this world, she's in it with Frank. She's willing to do whatever he wants her to do. I can't remember. We don't know a ton about the man who becomes Pinhead, but it just seems like anybody who ends up being a Cenobite was already in a pretty dark place.
Yeah, the guy who plays Pinhead, or the man who becomes Pinhead, I think they reveal in the second movie that he was a World War I soldier, and he made it out of the trenches alive. And then he goes to India, and he's very depressed. He has like survivor's guilt, and he doesn't know why he's still alive. They try to make it sympathetic. Even Frank in the book, Frank's an outright bastard in the book, but they kind of describe how he became one. You know, it's just like he was very depressed. Life felt meaningless. He was nihilist. And then, you know, I think a direct line is he couldn't find anything to live for, but that also meant he couldn't find anything to die for. So suicide was off the table, and he was just trying to find a reason to exist. And eventually that led him to, you know, all the stuff where he's just looking for sensations, some meaning, and once he does one thing, it's over, and he wants to do the next thing because the feeling never lasts.
Yeah, and he's just trying to do anything to like feel something.
Yes.
Which, you know, another interesting thing about that too is that it seems like some of the folks who end up in this world sort of relish it. Like the Cenobites seem to fit into their roles and embrace it. And then the second one, there's that psychiatrist who ends up being a Cenobite, and he fully embraces it. Like he feels like this is where he belongs. So it's kind of interesting to me too that Frank found what he was looking for, but for him, he did not embrace it. He's like, I was tricked. This is not what I wanted. So I wonder what the difference is there between the folks who embrace it and the folks who actually do find it to be hellish.
Yeah, like why did they not turn Frank into a Cenobite? In the book, it seems very rare. Like they seem to just torture people, and that's 99% of the people that go in there are just tortured. So the criteria, the mindset, whatever ritual you have to do for the Cenobite, for the engineer to turn you into a Cenobite, they leave it unclear in these first two movies, and so why the Doctor was picked, I don't know.
Yeah. Have you seen the latest Hellraiser, the one that was released in 2022?
I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think they fix a lot of the problems.
Yeah, I rewatched it last night, and the first time I watched it, I was like, yeah, that was okay. I think I enjoyed it more this time around. But one of the things I really liked is to go back to what you were saying about how the Cenobites are like tricksters and they offer something false, is I had forgotten that the main guy in that movie, the guy who owns the house, the rich man who owns the house, he thinks the same thing Frank does, and he like chooses sensation because it's like they expanded the mythology of the box, which I found really interesting, and how like if you solve the box all the way up through all the different levels, then you get an audience with God, and you get to request like one of the 5 options, and one of the 5 options is sensation. And so he's granted sensation, and they put this like machine in his body that basically like messes with his nerve endings. And so he's in a Frank situation where he's like, this is not what I wanted. I feel cheated. And so the whole movie hinges on him trying to get a second audience with God. And it's like, if it didn't work the first time, why do you think it's going to work the second time? And he chooses one of the other options. He chooses power. And so they turn him into a Cenobite. So that's a cool sort of hierarchy to add in the mythology of like, depending upon how you solve the box, you get a choice, and the choice is never going to turn out good, I don't think.
Well, because if they keep talking about, I can't say the French name, the La Machin.
Oh, Le Marchand. Yeah.
So if there's one configuration, like if there's one where you have to name it, there's obviously more. And I really like that they expanded upon that. And there might even be different boxes that have different things. I know in some of the later, the Scarlet Gospel, they talk about how there's different boxes. So they destroy one, but there's another one, and the rules for that one are a little different. And that's very intriguing just from a fan standpoint and a writer standpoint.
Yeah, you could do a lot with this mythology and with this franchise, and they've done a lot with it.
Yeah.
But most of it not great. Of it not great. But the new version, I thought, did approach it in a really cool way.
I would say 1, 2, the remake are good, and I would say 4 is good in a bad way, or bad in a good way. However you want to frame it.
It's a good, bad movie.
Yeah, it's a good, bad movie. 4 is. That's Hellraiser Goes to Space, basically. But if I was bringing up Hellraiser to a new horror fan, I wouldn't have them watch the other ones.
No. So I have watched 1 through 5 I had seen. And then, of course, 2022. So last weekend, I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm going to do this to myself. I want to watch some of the later ones I've never seen, which is not advisable, but this is what we do as horror fans. We go down the ridiculous road sometimes. And so I watched Deader and Hell World. And Hell World, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but they're in somebody's house. They're like at a house at a party. But like in this movie, it's like meta. So the people that are at this party are basically at a Hellraiser party because they've played this Hellraiser video game. And so the Cenobites aren't real. The box isn't real. Like none of it's real. And then it just spirals out of control from there. It was really like the plot was not good, but I found myself still kind of having a good time watching this movie. It came out in 2005. If you can imagine what was popular in horror in 2005. So it's not good, but I was like, I'm still kind of having fun. So I think the Hellraiser franchise is just one of those that, you take it very seriously in the early entries and you can take the most recent one seriously, and everything in between is just a mixed bag.
Is that the one with the young Henry Cavill in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've kept that in my pocket because my wife's a Henry Cavill fan. So I'm like, one night I'll just pick this really bad Hellraiser movie and she should be fine with it because Henry Cavill's there.
And I will say, like, Pinhead and the Cenobites look really great in these later entries. So even though the plot's not good and the characters aren't being served well, like to me, they look really great. So that's a bonus as well. Okay, that's a rabbit trail, but a fun one nonetheless. Let's see, what other religious themes or like imagery did you pick up on this film? Anything interesting you wanted to talk about?
So it really, if you break this down to like in a religious context and try to get something out of it, I think the main thing I take away when I think about this in a serious manner is that you are not your body, and they really the whole time they're messing with Frank. Frank is thinking of it as himself, but there's no separation of Frank's soul and Frank's body. And I think most religions, they want you to think of yourself as more than just this meat suit you're wearing. And there's an afterlife where the meat suit doesn't matter. Or versely, you get a perfect version of this sometime in the future. One or the, it doesn't matter, or it becomes perfect. But right now, the human feeling of it breaking down, of you dying, of it not working and you have to keep going on. I think Hellraiser just kind of speeds all them fears up and makes you think about them like in real time.
That's a really good observation. I hadn't thought of that. But one of the things I came across when I was like digging into what other people have to say about religion in this movie is they were talking about that line about a waste of good suffering. Like Pinhead says that, I think, to Kirsty, tells her, don't cry, it's a waste of good suffering. In that often religious people, be they just regular folks or, you know, priests and stuff, often they will like deny their flesh in order to become more holy. Mm-hmm. So, you know, people will abstain from sex, people will abstain from alcohol, people will abstain from all kinds of stuff, but people will do things to like deny their flesh in order to let their spirit thrive. And so in some way that's suffering in your body, mm-hmm. right? And so someone put forth that perhaps that is one of the things Pinhead might have meant when he said it's a waste of a good suffering to cry when you're suffering in your flesh. I was like, that's a really interesting connection. So I think that kind of goes with what you're saying about the difference between your body and your soul.
I think it also has, if you go down the whole pain pleasure road, there's the idea of false pleasure where you're not really feeling good. It's just that the bad feeling has went away. And that simulates pleasure, even though it's just the absence of pain and the absence of discomfort. I think a lot of people, they use that as a coping mechanism. A lot of times is they'll be having a really hard time in their life. And when a normal day, just a day without anything frustrating, anything messing up, they can dwell on that as a really good day. And that's a good, I think that's a decent mindset to have as a person, and to be able to grow as a person is, it doesn't have to be wonderful all the time. It just has to be okay. And if you're happy with okay, you'll be happy most of the time.
That's so deep, Matt.
I don't
know. But no, I agree, though, because I think a lot of times as humans, especially in our modern world, we kind of chase this ideal version of what we should be, what life should be, what happy means. And a lot of times, you know, and I bet you feel the same way about your wife, but like when my husband and I can just like sit in the living room on the couch together on a Saturday and like have nowhere to be and nothing to do, I don't know that I can be much happier than that, you know? And of course we have really high points in our life where like big important things happen, but just sort of like the beauty of the mundane things in life. And especially when you can think about like, oh, right now I have everything I wanted when I was a kid, you know?
Yeah.
So there is something to be said about, like you said, being happy with okay.
Yeah. Well, even on the physical level, like, you know, I woke up this morning with 2 arms and 2 legs, and, you know, I wasn't sick, and that I should be happy for that. You know, I don't you know, just because I don't have a 6-pack and can go to the Olympics this weekend, you know, that doesn't mean I shouldn't be happy. And, you know, if you think about what the Cenobites are doing and how they're manipulating people and torturing them and all that, like just the Cenobites not show up. That's a good day in this world, you know?
Oh, amen. Oh, yeah. Like, where were you? Like, you should have been Frank's friend. Frank needed a friend like you to be like, hey, man, like, can we just go get an ice cream or something? Like, is that pleasurable enough? An ice cream? Like,
I'm scared. I'm scared he would have converted me. So I mean, I just keep Frank a good arm's length away.
Oh, geez. Okay. Some of the other stuff that I came across when I was looking into religious stuff in this movie, and these aren't things that I need to go down a huge rabbit trail about, but I was thinking that the brothers, Frank and Larry, reminded me a little bit of like a Cain and Abel situation, where Frank is the Cain who is murdering his brother. Also, you know, we have basically a resurrection of Frank. and it takes blood to resurrect Frank. And that reminded me of a little bit of a connection of like a blood sacrifice used to like atone for a sin or to cover a sin. So those things were kind of like knocking around in my head. Also the skinning reminded me of the imagery of Christ being flogged. Mm-hmm. So I feel like there's like little nuggets throughout that, even though they're not directly tied to the plot, I was like, I feel like there's some influences here for sure.
There could also be an Adam and Eve metaphor where the Frank is the snake and he's tempting the wife with knowledge, and eventually she's taken in by him, and it ends badly for everybody.
Oh yeah, man, Julia in this movie, speaking of, she is like an all-time female killer. She's just great. She's fun to watch. She's got the look. She's got that 80s hair and those giant earrings. And like, she's just fierce.
I commented on my wife about her eyeshadow. Like, that's such an 80s look. And she's like pulling it off.
Oh yeah.
100%.
She really is.
The book, you hear a lot from Julia's point of view and Frank's point of view, but you don't really hear from Rory. Larry's name's Rory in the book, by the way, for some reason. I don't know why they changed it, but so she's kind of over her marriage because she thinks that Rory has only married her because she's beautiful, and she thinks he doesn't actually love her, and we never actually hear Rory's thoughts on the matter, so you don't know if she's right or wrong. And I found that very interesting, and it makes her kind of sympathetic. Like all of his advances in her head, they don't feel like they're coming from a place of love, and it makes her very bitter towards her marriage. And they can't really do that in the movie because you can't really hear her thoughts, and she has really no one to talk to.
Because in the movie, Larry is just like a dish rag. He's just boring, and you get the idea that maybe she never loved him. Yeah. You don't know why they're together, really, you know. Also, in the book, isn't Rory is Kirsty's friend, not her dad, right?
Yeah, so it's a weird love triangle in the book where Rory's clueless, and Kirsty, she seems to be like they kind of describe her as like a mousy lady who doesn't dress well, and she's in love with him, and he only has eyes for his apparently supermodel wife. And it's this weird triangle where he doesn't know these two women are fighting over him. I prefer the movie. I think it gives her more reason to care so much and more reason to interfere. Like, just socially, I don't know if a family friend would do the things Kirsty does in the book. It does feel like a stretch at some points.
I do like the dynamic in the movie. And like, also, I like the level of sleaze that it adds to the story, that like Frank and Julia are just, they had this hot affair and Julia is bored and all she wants is to have Frank back. Mm-hmm. Like, there's something about the tone of this movie that like, that's appropriate for. And then also you get this weird incestuous thing going on where Frank is like making comments to Kirsty, and that feels very weird, especially when he's wearing her father's skin. Like, it just adds this whole sleazy element that I think really works for this movie.
Also in the book, Julia, you can hear her thoughts, and like she's convinced she can fix Frank, and you can hear Frank's voice, and you immediately know it's never going to happen. And then so it makes her even more, I can't believe this woman's making these decisions.
I can fix him. This is the worst case of I can fix him.
But he's the opposite of her husband, who does exactly what he's told at all times. So I feel like she's looking for a battle.
Well, and it goes back to what you were saying about good days versus bad days. Mm-hmm. And Julia's bored. And it's like, there are worse things in the world than being bored, Julia.
Yes.
Are there any other, we've talked about some of them, but like, this is a horror movie. So like, what are some of your favorite like scary moments?
So I Body horror really freaks me out. So the hooks really bother me. And the scene that bothers me most has nothing to do with the Cenobites. It's when they're walking, when he's carrying the bed and it gets the nail gets his hand and rips his hand open. That's the thing that bothers me worse in this movie, especially if I know it's coming. I hide my eyes like a good 30 seconds beforehand because I don't want to see it, because that's realistic and that could really happen to me, and my brain has problems processing that.
That was like excellent direction, because that scene makes you cringe. Like, ooh, you know what's coming.
What about you?
So for me, one of the most disturbing things, well, there are two things. One, when Kirsty has that weird dream where she sees the body like laying on the bed and there are like feathers and there's blood and there's a baby crying, but that's like never explained what the heck that is. And she has that dream sort of early on in all of the incidents. And so if you don't know what's coming, that it's just like sort of a vague, just like weirdness. And I saw somebody put forth a theory that her mom is dead and we don't know why her mom is dead, but somebody said that perhaps her mom died in childbirth, and that's her basically like remembering the death of her mother. And that's why there's like the baby crying and all that. I was like, okay, I can see how that would be, that could be interpreted to be that. So that whole scene's really creepy. But then, of course, like, I mean, the Cenobites are terrifying. And to me, the moment that really bothers me the most is when she's in the hospital and they come out of the walls and the Chatterer puts his fingers down her throat, like in her mouth. Ugh, that's like horribly intimate and like violating. And it skeeves me out every time.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more things I want to ask about. A couple more like vague imagery that is not explained. One, do you have any theories about what the phrase Jesus wept means in this movie?
So I do believe I saw on some special features that was ad lib. That was a line that they workshopped the day of. They said multiple lines, and that was the one that felt right. And that's the one they put in the film. If you go into the Bible, Jesus says that when he finds out Lazarus died. Mm-hmm. And so if you think about it from that set point, Frank's dying, but is he really? Because apparently he can come back. So maybe he's lamenting his own death and his own resurrection on the other side.
Yeah, I think there is maybe something to that, because I'm pretty sure the word Lazarus is used at some point in the Hellraiser franchise. Well, they use it in the 2022 version, so that wouldn't have any bearing on the first movie, I guess. But the whole theme of Lazarus being dead and being resurrected and Jesus wept being tied in with that story, like, it's got loose connections, at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely connect those dots if you want to, which I think is what this movie does. They give you enough for you to put it all together in your head, and it's always going to be better in your head than if they had gave you the whole thing.
Oh yeah, well, for sure. And you can tell that Clive Barker has at least some familiarity with Christian imagery. And that's why like some of these things are like leaking through, even though it's not necessarily like a one-to-one comparison. And of course, like, I can't help it. Like, I'm sure you have the same, but like being raised in church culture and like inundated with Christianity, I mean, I see it all over the place, you know, especially in horror movies. And it's always like a treat when that happens for me. But sometimes, you know, it's easy to look into like things that aren't there. But I think that connection of Jesus wept, I think there's definitely some ground for that. Okay, another mysterious thing. The homeless man that we see like just popping up here and there throughout the movie, no explanation. And at the end, he takes the box and he turns into a dragon and flies away. Theories about this man.
Well, so it's actually, so in the book, it's the opposite, where he takes the box and flies away. But in the book, he's disguised as a homeless man, and he's the engineer. He's a Cenobite, and he bumps into Kirsty and gives the box back to her. And so the book ends with her holding this box she doesn't want, which is eerie in its own way, right? I think in the movie, the way they have it is just he seems to be some kind of watcher to make sure the wrong person doesn't get the box. Like he's there to make sure it doesn't end up like in the basement at the Vatican or something, you know?
Yeah, I looked into him a little bit, and there's extensive, which this is all of Hellraiser. There's extensive lore about everything. And he has a name, Eremite, I believe is how you pronounce it. That's his name. And that's basically his function, I guess, in the Hellraiser mythology is he is like the watcher and the guardian. And he does pop up in some other Hellraiser movies. So you could glean that. But if all you ever did was watch this one movie, you wouldn't know any of that stuff, you know. And I guess, too, like, is he also supposed to be the merchant at the beginning and the end?
Yeah, I don't know. Or, you know, maybe the merchant's like his little buddy. He gets a new merchant every couple of years. And
yeah. Like a Renfield situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you know, being a bone dragon, that sounds pretty badass. I mean, just living, you know, like I'm just going to watch this box and fly around the world. It sounds like a good life.
Ooh, if there are other boxes, are there other guardians, or is he guarding all the boxes?
Oh, I mean, just personally, I'd like to think there's more of them. Like maybe there's a bone griffin and there's like a bone T-Rex, or, you know, like there's like the little Power Rangers super team. I think that would be awesome. And it adds to the mythology, right? If there's a bunch of Cenobites on that side of the wall of existence, well, couldn't there be a bunch of guardians on this side of the wall of existence? And then, you know, now we have politics, and we have different religions or rituals. I think adding more benefits the story.
There's like I already said, there's a lot of richness if you could get the right folks to expand upon it. There's a lot there for sure. Even though we already have 11 films, it would be great to get a TV series.
Yeah, that would be cool. I think as the movies go on and Clive Barker stepped away, I feel like the whole them being indifferent and them not being 100% part of the Christian mythology, the Christian dogma. Like, I feel like people who didn't understand them started just pigeonholing them into generic demon territory. And it really did not benefit from that at all.
No. Speaking of which, so I watched tons of horror movies when I was a kid. My mom would let me just grab stuff off the shelf at the video store, and she would let me rent slashers and the whole 9 yards. I would not touch Hellraiser. I was not brave enough to pull it off the shelf. One, because the word hell was in it. And I was raised Pentecostal. And I'm like, I can't watch a movie with hell in it. And I thought, that's what I thought. Like, Pinhead is so scary. And I was like, oh, this is about a demon who lives in hell. You know? So I think it's easy to make that leap. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, it's like the name Hellraiser is very like catchy and ominous, but it almost doesn't fit what this story actually is because of the complicated nature of the world that they come from.
Yeah, I feel like that came from the marketing department, you know. But I mean, it worked. It's catchy, and we refer to the franchises. The whole thing's Hellraiser, even though it's really about the Cenobites in the box. The phrase Hellraiser has really nothing to do with any of it. But it still works. No. We still refer to it that way.
Yeah, it does. It sounds great. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up, differences as far as the book and the movie go?
I think I covered them all. The book's much more descriptive and much more sexual. And the Cenobites from the movie compared to the book, they're kind of bland, if I'm being honest. The way he describes them, they're way more messed up and evil looking. There's a lot of there's one of the Cenobite shows up. She's sitting on a throne of rotten heads, and she has 20 tongues down each thigh. And when she stands up, they fall on the floor. Like, that's just a random scene that they, you know, I'm sure they didn't have the budget to do. And if they did have the budget, I don't know if they would have got that across the rating board anyway.
Yeah.
And then they described this. They described the sex and the desires of Frank a lot more in depth, which I don't think would have went over well either for a movie in the 80s. I mean, like, they could have easily got an NC-17 based on if they did the book 100%.
Yeah, I mean, that movie's already like a pretty solid R. So,
though I don't believe there's any nudity in it. Nothing comes to mind, which is surprising.
No, and honestly, not a lot of language either.
Yeah, which is surprising. A movie about debauchery in hell, and there's not a lot of nudity and cussing.
I wonder if that somehow adds to the vibe of it in a way. It's almost like everything's very chaste is not the right word, but restrained.
Yeah.
That's the word I'm looking for.
I was going to ask you, do you think of this movie as a LGBT plus film? Because I've seen it on list.
Not in its like content really. I think, so of course, Clive Barker is gay. And so because of his perspective, there might be things in it that people in the queer community would identify with, possibly, that like I don't see as a straight person. Also possibly the like leather iconography.
Like the BDSM imagery.
Yeah. So like maybe some of that stuff, but I don't think on like a really like surface, like obvious level. What about you?
Yeah, I don't really see it that way. I know Clive said in interviews that a lot of it comes from, just the fact that he desired things that society said he shouldn't desire. And like, that's a big theme. But I mean, like, there's no one-to-one parallel character, and there's nothing like, I wouldn't say there's anyone who represents that. There's not a character that represents it at all. I mean, I guess you could take away some positives from it, but you would have to dig deep. There's nothing on the surface.
Yeah. And I think like in the book, Pinhead, who's not called Pinhead, don't they describe Pinhead as like not having a gender, like being kind of like ambiguous?
Yeah, most of the Cenobites are androgynous, and he has a high-pitched feminine voice, like a young lady in the book.
Okay. So if he had cast somebody who fit that description a little bit more, I think that could be a little bit more of a nod, but I would say Pinhead's definitely male.
Yeah. When Doug Bradley's voice sells the movie. I mean, like, if Doug Bradley didn't play Pinhead, this movie might not be a classic.
Yeah, you might be right about that. It's one of those great cases of unforgettable character who's only on the screen for a short amount of time, kind of like Hannibal Lecter, Without his presence, the movie is not as scary for sure. And of course, his voice, his costuming, all that stuff is really iconic. Other than that, like, I could easily see, like, in a modern interpretation of this, I could see Frank possibly being bi, since he's just like open to all experiences, like just wants to try everything. Like, I think that could have been an easy stretch, but again, not in 1987. Now I think that character could easily be bi.
I do believe they don't come right out and say it in the book, but it's brought up in passing that, like, he tried everything, and then really, and the only reason he's sober and off drugs is because he had to be to figure the box out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Frank's just out there. He's just doing it all. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about before we give final thoughts?
Well, I think we should discuss how amazing these graphics are. They really, for the time, and for him being a first-time director, first-time writer, this movie, the graphics are A+. I mean, they're all those reverse shots, all the clay. I think it's clay animation. They do a lot with a little, and I think that really helped the movie hold up. If those effects had been bad, if Pinhead didn't look right, if he looked wonky, if Chatter's little mouth thing wasn't chattering, I I don't know if this movie would hold the place in our heart that it does.
I agree with that. Like when you watch it now, it has like an 80s feel, but it is kind of timeless in a lot of other ways. Like one of the things I noticed is that the whole house is like not well lit and it's like dusty and kind of grimy. And there's a lot of like light coming through windows and there's dust motes. There's almost just like a sheen of like grain and haze over this whole movie. And it makes it feel surreal. At times it gives it like a romantic sort of fairy tale feeling. And I think it serves to like bolster the effects because you sort of feel like you're always kind of looking through a dirty window at everything. And I think that helps. The effects are never like in super bright daylight. But it all feels so appropriate for the world we're looking into. So I do think all of that stuff just combined to make the effects just really feel.
Yeah, the sets are great. I love the stained glass windows. It really makes the house stand out in your head. When you think of classic houses from horror movies, this is the house that has the stained glass rose windows. The pet store is chaotic. Apparently they sell monkeys at this pet store. I didn't even know that was legal. And then I think what was the other place? So the damp room and when Frank has the house, when Frank's been squatting in the house and it's dirty, like you really feel it. You're like, that's dirty and I don't want to be there. And I feel bad that Julia has to move in here right now.
Yes. Oh, and Frank goes in the kitchen and there's all that like rotting food sitting in the kitchen. Ugh. Mm-hmm.
Ugh. And then the last thing I think we really need to talk about is this amazing soundtrack. This is a classic horror movie soundtrack. I listen to it all the time. If I'm writing or if I'm working out, this is one of the go-tos. It gives me goosebumps. I love it.
Yeah, fantastic score. And you may already know this if you love the score so much, but originally it was supposed to be a different score. There's a band named Coil, and I don't know exactly what kind of music they do, but Clive originally like contracted them to do the score, and they scored the entire movie, and then he changed his mind and he wanted something different. And so the score we got is great. But I've listened to the whole score written by Coil, and it's also great.
Oh, wow.
It's a little more synthy, so it's a little more of the time. But to me, it still feels like pretty appropriate. Like I kind of wish we had a little bit of both, but especially that main theme, so great. And then like when we get the like bells or like the chime, like when the Cenobites are going to show up, like every time we hear that in any of the Hellraiser movies, it's like, ooh. It evokes the right feeling, that's for sure. So give us your final thoughts, Matt.
Well, I would say the actors in this movie really pull it. The guy who plays Larry, Andrew Robinson, he later becomes famous. He's a regular on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But he's under a lot of prosthetic makeup. But he was the bad guy in one of the Dirty Harry movies, and I think he's probably the only person in this movie that had a recognizable, famous face before coming into this movie. But Doug Bradley's amazing. The young lady who played Kirsty, this is her first movie, and I think she does a great job.
Yeah, she's great.
The two actors who played Frank, I think did a great job. I know one was upset because his voice got dubbed out, but both of them, I think, did a great job. So Skinny Monster Frank and Sexy Sweaty Frank, both those dudes are great. This movie affected pop culture. When we think about monsters, it added a new category of pleasure demon. I play a lot of tabletop. There's all three major tabletop games right now, D&D, Pathfinder, and Warhammer 40K. They all have a version of the Cenobites in them now. And then like they've been on Rick and Morty and The Simpsons and Family Guy. Like they're a part of our culture. And I think they really struck something in us we want to think about more. Like when the movie turns off, we're like, well, what the hell? How does being a Cenobite even work? And you'll ponder that for a long time. Yeah, I can't recommend this movie enough. Like I said before, I would watch 1 and 2 back to back. I would watch 4 with your friends, have some friends over, have some beers, pop 4 in. It's a great time. And then the remake's really good, and I hope they do more with that world. I want to see more of those Cenobites, because they took the Cenobites from the original movie and they added on. They used modern stuff and made new Cenobites. They didn't recreate the old ones. They're their own thing, but they harken back to this 80s version, and I think they did a great job. Yeah, so I would say go watch this, maybe even more than once, and also read the book.
I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I think Hellraiser is iconic, not just in horror, but in pop culture, and for good reason. The story is really unique. The characters are interesting. The visuals are iconic. I honestly just can't even imagine what it must have been like to see this movie in 1987. I'm sure that it was a game changer. There's also something really kind of charming about this movie, even though it is horrific. Like I was saying earlier, it feels intimate and small, and you can tell that it was low budget, but I think that makes the surreal visuals that much more powerful, because you feel like you're in just a regular family in a regular house in a familiar world, and then these grotesque things are happening in front of you. And of course, for me, I love the strong themes of dealing with good and evil and hell and judgment and the blurred lines and what does it mean. All that stuff just adds to the richness of the story on top of it being a straightforward, great horror story. I really appreciate the fact that we never really understand the specific mechanics of what is happening with the Cenobites. And of course, later entries expand upon that and we learn a little bit more. But in this first movie, we get a full story of the Cotton family, but all of that mystery and intrigue of the Cenobites is maintained. And I really appreciate that. So Hellraiser, I mean, it clearly had a huge influence on the genre and on pop culture. And I think it's going to just continue to be an influential movie for decades to come. Okay, so if people like Hellraiser, which should be everybody listening to the show, what would you recommend for similar media to check out?
Well, they've turned a lot of Clive Barker's properties into films. I really enjoy Lord of Illusions, which is based on him, and his supernatural detective. It also deals with the whole like devils and angels, and people trying to gain power through divine means, and so if you're like a fan of the Dresden Files, it's like that, but Clive Barkerified. A Nightbreed, which is the movie he made after this one, and I enjoyed that one as well. But you can see all the studio interference. They really wanted another Hellraiser, and that's not what that story is. That story is based off a book called Cabal, where the Cenobites are an order with rules and laws. Cabal is about monsters that are chaotic and have no rules, and it's not a one for one. They can exist in the same world, but they probably hate each other. They've turned the Books of Blood into a movie in 2009, which I enjoyed. It's a bunch of little short stories. And then I think they turned it into a TV show on Hulu just a couple years ago. So if you like Clive Barker, I haven't watched it yet. It's on my list.
Yeah, I haven't watched it either. So I guess we both need to check it out.
If you want some non-Clive Barker stuff, I would say Event Horizon is very much on the Hellraiser spectrum.
Yep.
Hellraiser in space. And then there's a movie called The Void, which is also about otherworldly entities coming into this world and trying to make deals, and people dealing with that and trying to put them back where they belong. Which I probably of everything I just listed, that's probably my favorite thing on this list. What about you?
So I would say definitely, as you've already recommended, read the book, The Hellbound Heart. You got to do it. And for sure, check out Hellraiser 2. And also, as I've already mentioned, Candyman. Not the same theme, but visually, even though Clive Barker didn't direct it, Candyman is still like very captivating and has another iconic villain and is dealing with some really interesting stuff. So definitely Candyman, both the 90s version and the newer version. I love them both for different reasons. Also, the new French Extremity movie Martyrs. Again, like the themes aren't 100% like a 1-to-1, but there's some similar body horror and just it's like a beautifully grotesque movie like Hellraiser is. Real downer of a movie though. Like it'll make you feel good about your boring good days. And then there's another movie that deals with horrific, hellish things called Baskin. I cannot remember what country that movie came from, but it's not an American movie, but it's a weird, gross little movie that reminds me of Hellraiser. I also have Event Horizon on my list. That movie is great for lots of reasons. And then also The Cell.
Yeah.
Which is that movie with Jennifer Lopez. Again, beautiful visuals. She has to go to this dark place that's not quite hell and find her way out. And it's a pretty entertaining watch. And I think that's it for me. So, Matt, thanks so much for coming on. This has been so fun. I knew it would be. Please plug your stuff for your guests. Tell us about your podcast.
Okay, yeah. So we have not made a new episode in about 2 years, but
Has it been that long?
Yeah. We lost our editor and everything kind of fell apart, but it's called Swords in Stereo. We talk about historical sword fighting, and we go through the different historical books, and we talk about the concepts within them, and then like also managing a martial arts studio. We talk about some of that stuff. I also run a martial arts studio here in Jacksonville, Florida called Bold City Longsword. So if you're ever in Jacksonville and you want to fight with a big Game of Thrones sword, just swing by. We're right off of I-10.
Yeah, that's a really, niche interest because most of the people that I have on also do horror shows, So every time you get to go on a show and talk about all your sword stuff, it's like, oh, well, that's something different. I mean, I don't think there are like 100 sword fighting podcasts out there to listen to. So if that's something you're interested in, even though there are no new episodes, people still have, I'm sure, lots of interesting stuff to glean from you. And I still have Florida listeners. So there might be people who,
awesome.
Would be interested in coming to your place. So that's our Hellraiser show. I have been, like I said, intimidated to talk about this one, but also really excited to do it. So I'm glad that we've finally done it. I feel like this movie, we've probably just scratched the surface. I think that you could go on and on about this movie. I think you can look at this movie through lots of different lenses, and religion is just one of them. You could probably look at it through the lens of all the major religions and find stuff in there where there are parallels and crossovers. That reminds me. There is something I wanted to read, and that is a quote from Clive Barker about religion, if I can find it. I thought it was really interesting. I'm a believer in the sense that Blake was a believer. I'm a believer in the sense that I take the Bible as something which is available for very private interpretation, and that interpretation may not sit well with conventional interpretations. The material is there for investigation, and investigation on an intimate level. Its lessons, its wisdom, its serenity, its good sense, its absurdities and malice, it's very malicious at times, are all part of what makes it remarkable. So I suppose my reading of it means I've ended up as a strange kind of believer.
This is my body. This is my blood. Happy are they who come to my supper.
Next month, I am going to be talking about an anthology film called Southbound, and friend of the show, Logan, will be joining me again. So if you've not seen Southbound, which a lot of people here probably haven't, please go check it out. It was written, directed, maybe both. Well, it's directed by a whole bunch of different people, but Radio Silence, the guys who did the latest Scream movies and Abigail and Ready or Not, they were responsible for that anthology early on in their career. So it's a good one. Check it out. Also, as always, you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Light and Shadow Pod. You can find me on Patreon if you want to support the show. So please go watch Southbound. And until next time, stay spooky.